Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. Well, let's talk about a notorious media person, interviewer, one of the disgraces on the BBC, if the BBC has any honor or morals. People think they do. And this is an interesting actual video giving you information on how the media works, and particularly Louis Theroux, known for his wild weekends, of which I was featured on some 25 years ago. This is very interesting. Back then I was very active, being a person who went to Giant Rock and was involved with extraterrestrial contact and monitoring with the Arm and Harm organizations, Alien Resistance Movement and the Hostile Alien Resistance Movement, because people thought that we were going after nice guys, if there is such of aliens. So I was running that and was very active there, had full-page ads in publishers like Nexus and Fate Magazine, etc. And we were doing a lot of work in that particular area. So lo and behold, we get a call from Louis Theroux claiming he's with the BBC, which I'm not sure if he's directly with the BBC or not. He certainly sells his stuff to them, but certainly works for them. And of course, as a BBC is used as a terminology, we have all the, this is the BBC. We saw that in all the old 1940 movies, and that the British Broadcasting System, which is a state-owned and controlled system, has some sort of credibility and basically good information. Well, I don't know if they're any better than any other. I've watched the BBC to this day, their international newscasts, and there doesn't seem to be anything overly special, interesting, or well done. They're just like any other news people. So, of course, when you hear that, you say, oh, you're going to be on the BBC, and, of course, this opens doors, and that's, of course, how he starts every conversation. So he decided that he wanted to speak with me about this, and, of course, this was my first major interview. I had already done many radio shows, and this person was going to come to my house to film me, and we would talk, etc. So I was open to those types of things, particularly at that time, to see what happens. Of course, media is not your buddies. They're not there to find truth. They're not there to report honestly. They're there for entertainment purposes only, and whatever their warped mentality is. I would come to find out that Theroux always thought that UFO people and UFOs in general were a joke. They didn't exist. As he writes in his garbage book that he followed up several years after speaking with me on the different people he interviewed for his weird weekend shows, he stated how ridiculous he thought that whole subject matter. Of course, we know 20 years later that UFOs are real. They always have been. There's government. All the government agencies have secret files on this. A lot of these were released to people under the Freedom of Information Act, proving that they had contact in that UFOs. But he wouldn't know that because he knows nothing. He knew nothing about the subject. He was just somehow heard about us while he was filming other things. Somebody told him whatever the reality of that was. So it was basically, though, this was all about a joke. But, what I'm going to talk here is not just about him and his alleged connections to organized crime and to all the other dark backgrounds that he's involved with, and the fact that he is part of the CIA group of people that hassle people. And of course, anytime you get involved with UFOs and aliens, there's a bullseye on your back. This is something that scares the intelligence agencies dramatically. They have secret contracts with extraterrestrials, agreements, I should say, and a whole bunch of things happen. They're very concerned about the word getting out, particularly back then. And it's still a hot issue to a large degree, and nothing really comes out. Tom DeLonge's 182 Blink fame has started a whole organization full of CIA con artists, and they are releasing nothing, and they're getting nothing out. Some goofy little thing they claim that is UFO-based with balls going around. We've seen 100 times. Nothing of value whatsoever. And he claims to be let in on the UFO program, which has to do with hostile aliens that is very different that he can't talk about. But the point is, saying that means that he has Tom DeLonge, of Blink-182 fame, and all the government spooks he's working with, including Hal Puthoff and the usual band of government whores, all agree that UFOs are real and that there are aliens. So we just so here's a news a news guy, and if anybody's followed this guy, and because I did interview with him, I followed him through the years just to see what he's up to, and it's quite interesting what he's up to, and who he's connected to and his background in general. Apparently his father was an American who was a travel writer. Ooh, do I hear I Spy? Tennis pro, traveled around the world, CIA. And his mommy worked for the BBC, apparently. Isn't that interesting? So we got his two connections, his alleged connection with criminal intelligence agencies and his alleged connection to, actually, the BBC. It's very hard to prove any of this stuff, so you take it at, this is my opinion. So, what can be proved? Certainly could prove they're UFOs, but he didn't believe that. So he shows up in my house outside of the Palm Springs area in a little town called Cathedral City, and shows up there with his crew of about 8 people. Couldn't be a person who has less of an impact than he would. My first impressions with him is, first, he dressed like Charlie Brown. You know, the guy from Peanuts? With a kitty outfit that looks like he bought at Kmart, which was big at that time. A pullover shirt, goofy little pants and goofy shoes, and a Beatle haircut. So you can imagine, this is the impression this guy gets. He probably thought he was very fashionable, plain and simple. And he was into music, so maybe he thought he was on the Beatles. They call me the fifth Beatle, the stupid one. Yeah, how you doing, Louis? So the whole idea is that, so already it was a bad impression. Now, they did the little trick that a lot of these media people like to do that come with crews. There's a trick they do to try and set you off, and that is the cameraman gets right in your face and gets very close to you. Now, when somebody's sticking a large camera in your face, this kind of pushes you back, throws you off, and they upset you, because that's what they want to do. They want to try and get you upset and talk. Well, I've had enough cameras stuck in my face and did my own filming that this didn't throw me off, so I didn't move at all. So he went into his usual stuff, and of course, as he says in his book, he doesn't think there's anything to it. He had no background. He had no questions to ask. He had nothing to talk about. So I laid out what the hostile alien resistant movement, ARM, was all about, and talked about the importance of it, what's happening with hostile aliens, what's happening to this planet, and all the things that go with it. And, of course, he wasn't interested in really any of that. Because you got to remember, then the worst possible thing could possibly happen. 12 hours being spent with Louis Theroux. Put pins in my eyes. And of course, my wife was there at the time as well. Who was part of the organization making important anti-abduction tools that was given to her by particular extraterrestrials. So the whole idea is that he had absolutely nothing to say, knew nothing about anything. Of course, he just popped into this. Or who are these people? And apparently, I'm not sure what they knew. This was a time when there wasn't the internet. You couldn't really look us up. We had a catalog operation. We have, as usual, we have many different divisions, and we had many different names, as we kind of have even to this day. We are very flexible, and we like to modify our organizations per the information. But we had 3 organizations back then: a basic occult science organization, an advanced science, and of course we had the UFO division. But he knew none about this. He never asked for catalogs. He never asked for any information. He had nothing to say. He knew absolutely nothing about extraterrestrials. So, and of course didn't believe a single thing that I talked about, and certainly didn't get any in depth. Didn't ask a single probing or important question whatsoever. there with his boobalicious producers as well, which knew absolutely nothing. They fed him nothing because they didn't know anything either. They're just a bunch of stooges. Apparently, they did fly in and on their covert criminal mission to check me out by his handlers. Apparently, they almost crashed coming into the Palm Springs airport. So maybe the positive energies were working all on. So certainly would have saved us a lot of trouble to have to deal with these stooges. So 12 hours they spend with you and you get nothing. They were supposed to even supply me with a videotape of the interview. That never happened either. Matter of fact, I've been interviewed by several people and not a single one of them ever gave me a videotape that they promised. They don't care. You're a stooge. Get it in writing and make sure there's penalties. I also had one TV show out of the UK that wanted to use some of our very unique equipment in their show, which they would guess, what is this? And I sent them the products, which I would never ever do again, and they sent them back thrown in a box, delicate stuff that was broken that they returned to me. This is the kind of rude scum that the media are. And particularly the Brits, who seem to be more than less sincere than everybody else. And they're nasty people who are really only concerned with themselves. I mean, these are people that have a long record of butchering Africans, Indians, etc., killing millions of Africans in their colonial days, and millions of Indians from India in their colonial days as well. So, and continued to be to harass the United States for over 100 years. Until we need help, mate. Yeah, we can't really fight these Germans. You better come over here and spill your blood. So, and of course, that's exactly what happened, and everybody should take note of all the exchange of American and Brits. You see them on our TV, not a single American on the entire British television networks or in their movies or anything else. You occasionally see on one of their talk shows, because who wants to listen to a Brit? They'll bring in a famous American. So the whole idea is this guy showed up with his crew. He kept a very, very strange attitude that he had from day one. He had no questions or anything else. He kept wanting to talk about if there were children in the neighborhood that he could meet that were involved in UFOs. Well, I found this very odd. But he constantly had an eye looking for children and trying to get introduced to them. Young children, particularly young boys. I found this very, very odd and quite strange. But this will come together in later information that we'll go into here as well. What can we make of it? Well, you'll have to draw your own conclusions. So the point is that all this time, now from my house in the Palm Springs area, we drove up to Giant Rock. This is a famous place where Van Tassel had huge meetings, where the Integratron was. This was a huge UFO gathering group for crowds of thousands of people in the early 70s and late 70s. Van Tassel was a famous contactee, and he was the person who built the Integratron, if anybody even remembers or knows this guy any further. He is the person who started contact, which what would be called the ASTAR Command. That's where it comes from, and those groups who are known to do very, very little, at least today. So I don't know what his contacts were, what was happening there, but this is a famous place for UFO spottings, and etc. It's not too far from also a huge Marine Corps base where almost all Marines are trained now. It's also not that far, as the crow flies, so they say, from huge military bases in the San Diego area. So there's a mountain range in between this area and San Diego. So we went up there, and of course, he did his usual thing, distorted what I said, cut things up, and wanted us to walk around there trying to hunt aliens. And I said, of course, well, we can't call aliens. If I could call aliens for any reason whatsoever, I would be the richest man in the world, and I would have all sorts of stuff. But I'm not going to prove stuff, particularly at that time, of any kind of overly quality pictures or anything else. It's just put your head in the chopping block, and you get nothing for it. There's no money in it. There's no nothing at that time. There you get media from stooges like him who are government spooks that I allege, and all those things are part would happen. So they got their little crew stamping around, making fun of you behind your back and do all the other things that they do. And of course, him saying that we'll go up there and you can call. This is ridiculous. So, and of course, that's in his 5-minute interview that he spent 12 hours to get. And what they do is they want the whole idea of these shows. And I said, this is ridiculous, man. We've had so many hours here. Well, that's what we do. Well, I said, if I'd known that, I wouldn't have done it. And of course, everybody should take note of that. Never, ever spend hours and hours with media who's not going to pay you for your time. And they're not. Secondly, don't give the rights to them to everything. Because he would go on and make tons of money off of me with books and follow-ups and everything else, and continues to try and do it, oddly, to this day. So he's made a bundle off of me and a few others, and I've gotten zero from it. So, and of course, if you ever get filmed or do anything, you better make sure there's plenty in that is contacting you or ways to contact you. Now, again, back then they didn't have the internet, so it's very difficult, as it is with radio shows of the similar times, or even today, of how do people contact you if you're on radio? Well, they're not going to. So the media done on radio and so many other places similar to that are worthless to you in general. So, and you got to remember that cable shows never have. 5 or 6 million people out of a population of 350 million ain't much. So you're not going to get a lot back from any of these type of things that people think you are. And if people do watch it, if 5 million people watch you, you're lucky if a 0.1% ever contact you if you're trying to pull people in, sell some product or whatever, so you can keep your research going, as we were doing. So he made all these misstatements. He wanted me to run around with guns and looking as foolish as possible. We had very advanced technologies, of course, he couldn't understand. We had lightweight helmets with special technologies built in them that were bike helmets. And of course, that looks terrible. What is he supposed to do? You don't want to carry heavy helmets around or have something custom made that costs you $10,000. But he was too stupid to understand that. I mean, this is a guy who probably had trouble dialing an AM radio. He seemed to be very preoccupied with meeting children wherever we went and looking at anything to do with music and not really getting into anything. He seemed to be oddly worried about hostile extraterrestrials, which I find odd, who rob you, rape you, and torture you, and thought that the fact that we protected people and executed some of these scumbuckets who were robbing and raping, he found objectionable. We should have found that in World War II, objectionable to killing the Nazis that tied their people up and cut them in half. Or bombed them and killed 60,000 Brits who now, little red-headed boy in the royal family wears Nazi uniforms. Yeah, you scum. So the whole idea is that there is a real serious problem with the media in general and how they use and abuse you. And they're not going to give you any kind of publicity that they can get away with. You're going to sign all your rights away, and they're going to do whatever they want. Now, is that a good business agreement because you're going to get something out of it by publicity that you think you're going to get? Well, not really. The only people who generate any kind of real interest in any products are network TV. As much as people think that this is not a medium that draws that many, it does. And of course, doing any other media doesn't really draw that much. Now, there is certain media now with the internet and everything else, but you don't really see people shooting up in stardom that much. A lot of it's very contrived. People who get noticed because they're on USA Network TV, the big 3-4 networks. So we need to keep that understood. So you don't really get any benefits from it. They're going to use extreme amounts of your time that you're never, ever going to get back. Don't do it. Make sure you draw lines. If you want to go to one of these silly interviews with whoever they are, make sure you have a time limit built in. Now, I don't know if I'd necessarily tell them that. I would just get up and walk away. You use them like they use you. So when they do, after filming 12 hours of video and then cutting it down to, I don't know how long the interview was, but I think it was under 4 minutes, where they slice in whatever they want to make you whatever they want to make you and fill in everything. And they're going to take out anything of value that you have to say. So if after 12 hours they can get a picture of you picking your nose or scratching your ear, well, that's what they're going to put in there because they want to make you look like an idiot. And you have to really wonder what's behind all those things. And they weren't the first, weren't the only ones who did this. I was interviewed on CNN for their American show, or at least they lied to me saying it was going to go on there and then put it on to something else, did the same thing. As a matter of fact, for some reason, when I told her, say, look, the BBC did this, I don't want to repeat it, she wanted to go as long as the BBC because her idea of journalism was to do something as long as the BBC did it. Not to find good information, do something. And eventually, again, she, even in her interview, worked against me because I refused to go there and be their little puppet. So she went and talked to negative people who attacked me and what I was doing and put that in the same show. That's the kind of scum the media are. Now, I'm not sure what's wrong with them. The real story is to make someone like this look interesting and different, not to try and make them look like fools. You would think that that would be a better show and that it would cause a lot more interest and talk. If someone's just a joke, well, how long is that joke going to go? But this is the media. They don't seem to know anything. And I'm not sure what they get off on, but they seem to be a very group of controlled disinformation agents. So by then, the CNN knew who I was, and I'm sure was contacted as well by all these criminal agencies that want to go after people that are involved in these areas. This is what they do, and they have endless amounts of money to do it. They don't want anybody talking about extraterrestrials and have any credibility whatsoever. That's what they do. And there's over 2,300 intelligence agencies that are totally and completely out of control and virtually have unlimited budgets. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, people. So here again, it was the same thing with him, with his goofy little cruise, overstocked, over amount of people to do a simple little interview that, you know, people do on the net today, and people have even made films from their Apple phones. They have to have a crew of 12 to 15 or whatever the hell it was with them showing up. There's a cameraman, there's a guy that carries stuff, there's one guy who stands in the corner with a hat on, another one who picks his nose. I mean, this is your typical stuff, and the reason why that everything to do with the media costs so much. Yeah, when you see on the internet and people on YouTube and other places, they don't have this kind of staff, and they certainly can put out interesting information. So the point is that he was constantly doing these kinds of things and constantly trying to have me find children for him. I found this all very odd. And of course, I did none of that. So if we follow his career, I mean, this is a guy who knows nothing, has on the subject matter, and has nothing, no questions, nothing of value, knows absolutely nothing. So it was just the fact of what kind of shitty little interview can he do, put that together in 3 minutes with 12 hours worth of film, and then what he put together, what he did. So being a fascinating organization, everything with it, there was something. But, you know, the fact of making you look ridiculous certainly doesn't help your organization or what you're doing. It certainly comes out is that he then, of course, followed up, and I don't know, it was a year or two later, writing a book on that. He's going to milk it for more. Remember, I got zero from any of this. This Wild Weekend show has been shown thousands of times in the last 30 years and is still running all around the world. He is making a fortune off of me. Plain and simple, and everybody else he's ever interviewed. This guy is totally and completely untrustworthy, and plain and simple, everything that he does has a great question to it. He comes out with a book talking about his weekends again, and of course I have an entire chapter there. And what he did is went around looking to disgrace me. He went to UFO people and asked if they ever heard of me. Well, I never got involved with the UFO people. They don't support anybody. They're 90% government agents and 10% goofballs. And of course, they never followed up on any of that. Of course, the intelligence agencies that are involved in these areas made sure that I got very little publicity past that. Nobody called me for interviews or anything else. Why? You're on the BBC, you're on a top network show, you're broadcast on Bravo and everything else. Well, you think the phone would be ringing off the hook. Well, there were some people, but only apparently a few Europeans were interested, I'm assuming out of the control directly of the intelligence agencies. A A major newspaper in Holland contacted me and did a front page story on me. There were a few other people that called me and were interested. Who these people are, what they did, who knows? And who knows what they wrote in their Danish, or I should say their Dutch newspaper as well. From what I understand, it was basic the facts. But what does all that mean? So, I come to find out with him, of course, is that he has been doing this also. He tried to totally and completely, and did. He also labeled me as a Satanist, which at that time, in the middle to late 80s, was a horrible thing. This was during the Satanist period, where people were on TV and talking about satanic ritual crimes. You know, something he ought to know quite a bit about, and he certainly does know about all of that, as far as I'm concerned. So the whole idea is that he did try to tie me in with Satanists. He got Satanist websites that were active when the time of the book kicked in, which was, I don't know, several years later, and when the internet started to pick up, to put me in there on their websites as someone who was a Satanist, which couldn't be further from my belief. I've been fighting Satanists all my life, who are part of the military-industrial complex and have, to a large extent, are in control of all sorts of media now, all the publishers, etc., and working with that. And, of course, the intelligence agencies make sure that they do this, as well as working with organized crime that control these people. They have organized crime, go in and talk to publishers, etc. This is a fact. And of course, they're involved with all these, as we know, the Illuminati groups have been controlling people and generating power through child molestations, blood sacrifices, etc. So this is all part of how they operate, whether people want to believe this or not. It's a fact. And, of course, they control all the news media. Every single person in the news media is 100% controlled. Why would you think they would have some sort of independence? You don't understand, if you believe that, you don't understand how the control systems work. And I'm not going to go into that right now, but they all are. Like, all the police work for the criminals, all the doctors, etc. This is the way it is, and you're not going to have a stand in the community unless you do what they say. So, but his interest in and condemning other people in a lifestyle that I allege he's part of is quite amusing. So he tried to label me that way and get me into trouble in those particular areas so people wouldn't follow or go involved in my organization, because it's a joke that I was a Satanist when everybody else are the Satanists, including, I allege, him, who are involved with that, and his entire organization and family, who seem to be involved with these kind of satanic cults and their bizarre practices and what they do with children, etc. So all of these things are part and parcel of what they do. Now, if you follow this, in recent years, he went and tried and expose Scientologists. And the person who was an informer for him that he was working with, he attacked. You can see that right on YouTube and the networks. He hassled this guy, putting him down, calling him just like the rest of the Scientologists. Well, it's very interesting because, if anything, he's sold out to the Scientologists as well so he could attack this other person. I wouldn't doubt that whatsoever. I mean, here's a guy with a background that is extremely questionable in every possible area. So then, to cap this all, oh, you're making terrible, well, I allege these things. I have no proof. But the point is that, isn't it interesting that he interviewed a guy, kind of strange, why would you, who was notorious for getting his daughter, selling her as a whore, and having her friends and other people rape her for money. Now, she came out and stated this, and this was interviewed. He interviewed her, and he interviewed her father, who, of course, denies all this. And so who are we supposed to believe here? And there really was no proof one way or another. But what happens? Well, Lewis has this guy who's accused of selling his daughter, raping her, and having other people rape her, over to his private house in London. And what does he say to him as this guy who was challenged again and said, well, I'm not going to talk to you, and starts to walk out? He says, hey, remember, if you ever need a place to stay in London, make sure you come here. I never was invited there. He didn't say I could come to his house in London. That was never an offer. Now, this is on film. Everybody can check this out, people. None of what I said about his attacks on Scientology, the informer he was working with, nor this is something that I am contriving. It's on film. It's 100% proved. Of course he wants to work with somebody who's involved in child molestations. Well, isn't that what all the people that he works with and possibly even he's involved in? Well, I find this very, very interesting, but it does fit the pattern. And it does fit the pattern that there's no talent, nobody who somehow got jobs with the BBC and even got into other programs. Apparently he was a writer on other documentary shows, American documentary shows. I mean, to bring this guy in is really insulting, but you have to wonder what those shows are as well. So, Michael Moore he worked for. Well, Michael Moore, I don't know. I don't know about you, your organization. I haven't heard from you recently, but you had one of these guys in there, and probably he was an infiltrator to find out what you were doing and report back to his masters. But the point is that you invite a known person whose daughter states to him and others that she was used and forced into having sex for money and being sold out for her father's benefit. And you want this guy to stay at your house. Well, I certainly would do the same thing if I was into the same thing that they are. Well, there's a big question here. But let's also look at the media in general. They are not on your side. It's not free publicity. They're not making commercials for you. They're going to take whatever you give them and spin it however they want. So you can talk for hours, and I'd recommend you don't. And if I had to do it over again, I would not spend the time, and I would repeat the same thing over and over again. I would never say anything new. But I certainly wouldn't spend 12 hours in a show to get 3 minutes that they could have got in an hour. There was no reason to do the rest of that stuff or to spend any more time. Secondly, if people are going to take enormous amounts of your time, and that means over an hour, where's the beef, people? You better be paid for this, and I don't care who they are. They are not a news show. Now, news shows cannot do two things. They're generally not supposed to pay you. Secondly, they're not supposed to contrive everything. They can't stage things as news shows. This is what they're not supposed to do. This is a problem that the producer was doing with CNN, which the cameraman got fed up with all this stuff and said, well, you know, we can't do this. You're contriving stuff. And apologized for this person causing us hours and hours of time for no reason whatsoever. So at least that cameraman was a legitimate person who gave a damn. But of course that was an American on top of it. So let's understand that these Brits in particular are very questionable people. So the whole idea is that don't do that. If you're going to be taking that amount of time, it is fair that they should pay you, not for the interview, but for your time if it's a news. But this is not a news show. This is an entertainment show. It has absolutely nothing to do with reporting facts or anything else. They're setting up things as entertainment. It's an entertainment show. The Wild Weekend is not a news show. I had the same game happen to me with the original Daily Show. Now, this was originally done by Craig Kilborn, who I kind of liked at the time, and they called me up and said, we want to talk to you. I said, who are you? Well, we're a news show. I said, who are you? Yeah, this is the Daily Show. And my answer to the Daily Show was the fact, well, I love your show. I watch it all the time. I said, it's a funny, funny show. It's not a news show. Well, we're a news show. We let people talk. And I said, yeah, you do let people talk. And then you make fun of them for the rest of the show. And that's exactly what The Daily Show does. And Jon Stewart took over and modified the show, etc., to make it just as silly. But it's not a news. They pretended to be. But it was a satire of a news show. It wasn't a news show. And I watched interview after interview because I found that amusing. The satire amusing and kind of like Craig Kilborn's kind of a bizarre humor. But the bottom line is that it is not a news show. They make fun of everybody. And yes, they let you talk because they want to be able to, the more you say, the more they're going to make fun of you. I said, you got to be kidding. I said, I don't know why anybody goes on The Daily Show. I guess nobody watches your show. I said, the problem that you had by contacting me is that I watch your show all the time. I'm a fan of your show. What's other interesting is when Craig Kilborn moved to CBS in Los Angeles, what happened? I got a call from their producer. And again, asking me to send them a videotape. I forget what the instance was there. I think it was one of the people that I represented or published their books, who wanted me to send me a videotape. And I said, well, okay. I never really intended on doing that. I said, can you get me tickets? He said, okay, call the ticket number. If you have problems, get back to me. He didn't even want to take the time out to send me tickets, but expected me to spend money and the cost of a videotape. Doesn't matter if it's $3, $4, $5. I didn't find that in the proverbial hole in the ground. I made that money, unlike him who did nothing to make his money, and lots of it. So I said, okay, click. So the point is that neither did I follow up with tickets in general, but you got to understand that Hollywood tickets are not what you think they are. And any of those people wanting to go to these shows should understand that. They sell, if there's 70 seats, they'll basically put out on the street 200 tickets. So you got to get there, you got to get in line, and then you got to get in there or you can be. And I've got tickets that I've waited in line for hours and not gotten in. So I was very well aware of that, and certainly he's well. So there are guaranteed tickets. If you're turned away, they give you a guaranteed ticket, which you can come back to, and then you get at the front of the line. So he didn't even want to bother to get me guaranteed tickets. Hollywood, Hollywood. Understand what the media is and all about, and understand how they use and abuse you. For some reason, the media people think they're special, have egos that are through the roof, and think that they're doing a service for you. When you go to someone's show, whether it's a talk show, whether you're interviewed, or anything else, you are making their show. I was on Art Bell for his entire time. I don't know, was that 3 or 5 hours, whatever it was, many moons ago, 30 years ago. I made his show. I was the one that talked to everybody. I was the one that people filled in and listened, called in to talk to. He didn't do anything. He was a dumb rock there and knew nothing about the occult sciences of that time either. Another dummy who had absolutely no knowledge whatsoever. And all it got down to after that was him saying how much he loved Jesus. And how the bad occultist I was. I mean, it just shows you the kind of mentality for this Navy nobody. So the whole idea is that we need to fully understand of how the media works, and if you ever get involved with media, be extremely careful. Remember, don't talk and talk and talk. Say something over and over again. Don't give them a lot of time. You're not losing anything. They're not going to show you in a positive light. You're not going to make money from it. You are making their shows. As a guest on a TV show, what do? When you see a talk show, they may say The Tonight Show starring Jimmy Fallon. And tonight's guests, well, nobody gives a damn. Everybody knows Jimmy Fallon's there. Why do you watch Jimmy Fallon? You watch Jimmy Fallon a lot of the times because Burt Reynolds on there. I guess that dates me. Whoever's on there now, who the big stars are. Tom Cruise. So the point is that all the people that are coming into these shows, now you tune in for that. And when I watch a talk show, well, who's on there? I don't want to see Jimmy Fallon's high school antics, the 3-year-old that he is. I want to see the guests. What do they talk about? Maybe it's somebody I'm interested in. Maybe there's a new author with a new book. That's who's making the show. It is not Jimmy Fallon. He's nothing but the flagpole, not the flag. And everybody should be quite understanding of that. So handling media is very important. If you send products to somebody, make sure you have a written contract that if something happens to this product, that they're going to pay for it. And that you're going to get it back. And you should tell them, since we don't have no money to pay you, I just bought my Rolls Royce yesterday. This is what they tell you. And okay, fine. They don't necessarily want your product because they can't necessarily use it. They should pay you for the product and say, look, when I get my stuff back, I'll refund you. Well, we can't trust you. Why should I trust you? Who are you that you're so trustworthy? Well, they're not, as what happened to the British game show, where they threw expensive psychotronic equipment in a box like it was garbage and sent it back from England. What kind of disrespectful crap is that? What kind of people do you have working on your show? Well, needless we say, it was a great Brit. So these are the problems with dealing with the media in general, and they're kind of wholesale disrespect that they give you in general. That they disrespect you on every single level. They'll take hours and hours of your time, not pay you a penny, make millions potentially offer you, and leave you nothing. Plain and simple. So remember that, everybody. That's how the media works. Now, if you get involved with the media, and for all my business school students and for anyone who follows me, it's very important that you understand how to deal with the media. We all go there thinking they're the nice guys and, oh, gee, what a fun compliment it is. They want to interview you. Well, remember, in the end, the joke's on you. They're not interviewing you, they're using you. They want to be able to take your signature which says, hey, stick a giant dildo in my mouth and it's okay. Because that's what you sign off to these people. And that's what they do. You have to be very, very careful. And you have to be very careful what contracts you sign. It's not going to benefit you. And this guy has been milking this story for 30 years. And let's give you the coup de grace, the end of it. Here, he contacts me about a month ago saying, we're all locked down in British town and we were thinking of interviewing audio paper. So, here he is trying to, after he insults me, after he labels me as a Satanist, after he works with organized crime to try and get me in trouble and have problems like he did when he tried to disgrace me when he wrote that book, and then tried to set up meetings at that time, which I forgot to add, so he could set me up with criminals to harass me or potentially even claiming that he was doing some sort of story in a particular area which I had happened to move to. So, very, very interesting. He has the nerve to recontact me so he can then make more money off of me, that he was going to air this show on BBC again. Now, BBC is just a network, and they have BBC 4, 3, whatever it is. I'm not sure what the difference is there. There's Junior BBC, Goofy B, but, you know, they don't have any, I don't know if they have any private networks like we have in America and the UK or not. I don't know. They're usually, the British Broadcasting Company, from what I understand, is subsidized by the British government. So the whole idea is they put out comedies and so many other things, and what they usually do, they're 3-cent television shows that have 6 episodes in. This is what they put out there, because there's very little money, apparently, that they gather from their networks. That's why everything comes from America. America has the money, and it has 350 million people to pay for it. You've got to remember, Britain's only got 80 million people. So the audiences aren't there, and apparently they can't figure out how to make money off their TV. So you get Doctor Who, the original Doctor Who's that were made in the BBC's garage. So the whole idea is that this is what you get. So here he has the nerve to contact me again, and I thought it was a put on. So I said, hey, why don't you give me your number? And I actually got his number in the UK. Isn't that interesting? So the whole idea is that all of this that goes with that shows you this kind of type of things. And he contacted me a time before that. And again, I played along to see what this guy was all about. And this is when he was producing the Scientology people. So this guy is always backstabbing everybody he's with. He does the most ridiculous, worthless shows, and apparently has no problem making sure that he is directly connected to child molesters and abusers that he wants to stay in his house. Well, you take that for the value that you think you could get for it, and for the other things that he showed to me, and his constant trying to connect and find children in the general neighborhood. So the whole idea is that, what do we make of all this? Well, You come to your own conclusions. As I've stated, these are all alleged by this person, and how is any of that? So it's perfectly fine. I'd like to see how he answers all this. Well, he hasn't got any answers for it. This guy is someone that everybody should stay far away from. Him and his interviews are all garbage. It's interesting that he goes from jokey interviews to interviewing in places, even criminals and guerrilla organizations in places like Nigeria. So he goes from doing shows on extraterrestrial warriors to wrestlers to porno, and this is all that was in those weird weekends. And here he talks to homosexual porno people and talks about getting wood and everything else. It's amazing of what this guy got into. And it was interesting that he would be talking to homosexual pornography stars. And he goes from all this ridiculous stuff to going to Nigeria to talk to these terrorists. Well, he's keeping up with his spy program, isn't he? How you doing, I spy? Huh? How you doing? Where's your cohort? No? Where's your Bill Cosby? I'm sure there's one of those organizations. Just like Daddy did, who traveled around the world as a travel writer. Who, by the way, I guess was an American. Maybe he was reporting to the CIA and MI5. So, these are the things that go on, people. This is another fascinating stories from the annals of course, IGOS Success Tech and Dr. Thor Templar. Stay tuned. I have lots of new adventures coming, which I'll detail my activities in the alien resistance movement and all of the amazing things that I did and the stories that come from that, which is all coming out now. And, of course, recent stories, again, where I'm harassed by the criminals out there now because I know what you're doing. I know what you're up to. And, of course, old Dr. Thor has a big bullseye on his back, and I've survived through my personal power, people. And this power is how I teach people how you can survive and prosper as well. So, until next time.